describe a worship manager as air traffic control, right? So when you go to an airport and it is the responsibility, especially if you go to like Atlanta and all of these planes need to get to the runway and take off at the same time. What a worship manager does is that they control all of the planes and they clear the runway so that the speaker of the hour can take off on time. I'm sure, as you know, the worst thing for a pastor to do is to stand up and watch everybody leave the sanctuary because they're tired of sitting or the church service has gone too long. So my job is just to continue that flow of worship from behind the scenes.
Get your first place prize. Don't need the front row just to let your light shine. The highest place of honor, serving at the lowest point. The power's in the voice, and you ain't gotta make no noise. They might say you finished last, but you still got the power, power, power. It's your time. Your gifts will last. Serve second. Still lead. It's your time.
Hey, family, this is the Serving Second podcast, and I'm your host, Dr. Toussaint Williams. And today I am so excited because I have the privilege of introducing you to one of my favorite worship managers, favorite directors. She does a little bit of everything. She is the epitome of what it means to serve second. Many of you know her. You've heard her sing. You've seen her plays. Miss Danita Jones joins us this week. Danita, thank you for joining the Serving
Thank you for
Second
having
podcast.
me. Thank you.
What happened today or this week that you said, man, I'm excited about just waking up today?
But you know what's funny is that it's always something very small that somebody else would kind of like discount, but genuinely get excited over little things like one of my children was a little under the weather and she's back to like bouncing off of the walls and driving us crazy and it's in a very genuine way. And so that puts a smile on my face when kids get better, when that copay pays off. Because
Yeah, listen,
if you're a
that's
parent,
it.
you know what that means. And when the copay pays off, you
Absolutely.
feel better.
Now, let me ask you, because before we dive in,
Yeah.
we have a number of gifts, but you also have a crew that you stay with, hang out with, and a boyfriend that you often post about. Tell us a little bit
Yeah.
about your crew.
The boyfriend. I love that people know him as that. So for
Yes.
anybody that is new here, hashtag the boyfriend is my husband of 23 years. I got it right because I had to think about it because he's the one
Yes.
that remembers the years and the birth and the anniversaries and with him I have four incredible children, a 19-year-old college student, a 16-year-old sophomore, and a set of 14-year-old middle school twins. So our house is the greatest show on earth.
I
If I
can,
can say it that way, but
I can
it
only
is a blast
imagine.
every day.
Listen, the reason why I say that, because I want to kind of put in context what we're going to talk about. Like,
Mhm.
you don't have just a brain, like you're navigating and juggling as all mothers do with kids. You mentioned with your babies, and dealing with the child that just went off to college, all of those
Yes,
things,
yes.
all those things. Now, I know you as a worship manager. How long have
Mhm.
you been doing worship management? And then I'm also going to shift gears and talk to you about what you do with Breath of Life as a children's creative director.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So worship management, I've been doing that for I want to say it's going to be 15 years this year, but I've been the worship manager for about 14 years for the same pastor. And it is just one of those things where when you there's a rhythm I think that a lot of leaders find when they can create a good team. And I've just had the privilege of serving as the worship manager for Pastor Deblier Snell for 14 years.
So let's walk through that. Now, what was a typical, for those people who may not know, they may see you moving around, or for people that may not have been in churches where they understand, what is a worship manager? What is your, describe a typical weekend at church?
Oh, word. Okay. So, well, let's start here. A worship manager, oftentimes they get a bad rap because there's this idea that we are put in place to make the worship service at church That standard 11 o'clock hour, that 12 o'clock hour, depending on the culture of your church, we're put in place to speed everything up, and that is not who we are. I describe a worship manager as air traffic control, right? So when you go to an airport and it is the responsibility, especially if you go to like Atlanta, and all of these planes need to get to the runway and take off at the same time. And hundreds of people are depending on that service. What a worship manager does is that they control all of the planes and they clear the runway so that the speaker of the hour can take off on time. And on time is up to that particular pastor. There are pastors that prefer to get up before a certain hour, or maybe there's a pastor that has a vision of being out of church at a certain hour. What I do is that I take that specific pastor's their standard sermon length. That is something that I study for several weeks, and I take that length and I build it into a run sheet first, and then based off of how they want church to end and based off of their sermon length, I build the worship service backward so that everything can fit in, and our pastor, regardless of who they are able to get up at a reasonable hour. Because I'm sure, as you know, the worst thing for a pastor to do is to stand up and watch everybody leave the sanctuary because they're tired of sitting or the church service has gone too long. So my job is just to continue that flow of worship from behind the scenes. And so that's sometimes why people see me over in the corner with that headset on, because I'm calling the shots.
So when you're dealing with this worship minute, how many people are you juggling? Is it just the speaker? Or, I mean, for those who don't know Oakwood University Church is, we have 2,000 members. And so
Yes.
how many people behind the scenes are you working with, the camera operators, you people talking through in your headset? How many people are you navigating during these services?
It honestly depends on the service. The crux of the job is essentially ensuring that there is one person to report to. Oftentimes when you go to programming, there's this person and that person, or this person in charge of something or that person in charge of something, and there really is no way of like one person kind of letting everybody know what's going on. So when the worship service starts, there's this idea that everybody kind of comes to what I do, to who I am as a worship manager, and I basically give instructions out. Now, we have an incredible, team upstairs that handles all the camera shots. I don't have to call those. I have some amazing people that do that. So that's not in my ear. The camera people are on a different headset. My job is to ensure that everything that is happening on that floor. So there are times that I may be having to bring a choir in that's got, over 80 people, or bringing in at the beginning of the year, oftentimes we will pray over some of the athletic teams at the school. And so, hauling on stage several hundred different students and being able to do that in such a way so that it does not interrupt that flow of service. So, if you notice, especially if you're one of our online members, the goal is not to have a break when you're watching, and that not a long pause, but know that that's also my goal for the people that are sitting in the audience, that it's also not a break for them. Because I always tell people that my responsibility as a worship manager is for the people that are in the ship, and then that actually filters out to the people that are watching online as well.
So that is the function. Let's talk about the heart. How did you get there? And if this was another podcast, I would tell you
Yeah.
she sings, she does everything else. But what was the like? Because this is something you do. This you're there every. It seems like every time the church is open, you're there. Some type of
Yeah,
program,
right.
funerals, and all those things. What was it that said, "I want to give" or "I want to serve in this way"?
So, I in 2002, I was still in college at this university in Nashville, Tennessee, and a friend of mine came to me and they were just like, Mount Zion Baptist Church wants to do James Weldon Johnson's God's Trombones. And they asked me if somebody would direct it. And I figured, you would be a good person because I was a theater major at the time. I was in the directing class at the time. So it just was a natural fit. And I knew the individual. And it was, so he takes me over to the church and I get this incredible tour, but in the middle of the tour guide was just like, "Hey, Bishop Walker wants to meet you." And so that was huge for me. And so I go into, his office and we're talking, and he finds out I'm Seventh Day Adventist. And so he's like, "Well, have you ever been to Mount Zion before?" And I was like, Not like for church. I had been for other things." And so he was like, "I want you to be able to come to church to just feel out what our worship service is like." And he was like, "Have you had a chance to go into the sanctuary?" I was like, "I would love to go in there." So Bishop Walker takes me into the sanctuary. And this place is massive,
Hmm.
in Nashville. If you've never had the opportunity to go to their main location, it is massive. And so we're standing on the stage, and I happen to glance down away from the podium, and I see this box. It's about this big, and it's black, but it's fairly large. And so I look over and I say, "What is that over there?" Because I could tell by the way it was placed that the person in the audience couldn't see it, but whomever was at the podium could see it. And so Bishop Walker looks up into their media booth, and he's talking to somebody, and he says, "Hey, turn this on for me down here." And when he turns it on, it's a timer. And
Mm.
I was just like, "Okay, well, why do you have a timer up here?" And he was like, "Because, we time the segments of our service." And that particular day, the timer happened to be at 8 minutes. And I was like, "Well, what happens when it gets to zero?" And he was like, "Then the person is finished." I was like, "Well, what happens if they're not, done talking?" And he was like, "Well, then we turn the mics off." And I was like, "Well, how often have you had to do that?" And he was like, "You only have to turn the mics off once." So in my head, I was like, "There's no way that you can have a meaningful worship service if you're time segmenting every portion of the service." And I think he could see the look on my face. And he said, "Listen," he said, "I have over 10,000 members." He said,
Mm.
"And we have over 5 services per Sunday." He said, "I have a responsibility to give people meaningful worship services and then getting them out so we can start the next one for the next set of members." And I was like, "Okay," still kind of unbelieving, if I could say. And, he said, "Come to church on Sunday and you'll see." So I pick a random service, but I pick what I thought was the main service, which was their noonday, because I'm like, "This will be the one that will probably go over because, it's the main
Hmm.
service," we would refer to it. And, it was an incredible church service. I mean, it was an incredible church service. Everything was phenomenal. Praise and worship, the prayer, offering, they took up offering. This was back in the day when there was no such thing as, like, Zelling or Cash Apping. Like, this is 2002, so that had not been a thing, right? So they're fully, like, taking it up, and the meditation, and he preached mercy. He preached, and I remember sitting there and being fully engaged. And by the time I looked at my watch, that service started at 12 noon. It was over by 1:10. And I sat back as everybody was kind of pouring out of the sanctuary. I sat back and I was like, "There is something here that we have been missing, at least in the churches that I'd been going to. This need to feel like you haven't been to church unless it's 3 and 4 hours long, and you exhaust the people." But I felt like when I was walking out of there, like I wanted to run through a brick wall. I was like, let's go. I am on fire for God. I wanna go and, like, do something else. And so that's when I was just like, "There's something here." So I took it back to, I kind of held that. And when hashtag the boyfriend and I got married and we moved to Columbus, Ohio, I was, we were at a church there. We were young people at a church there, and there was a preacher by the name of Marquise Johns that came, and they were gonna run a revival service. And somebody mentioned the fact that they were just like, "Hey, we need to make sure that this revival is like an hour and 10 minutes every night. Like it has to be out by like 8:15." And I was like, "Oh, you guys need a worship manager." And everybody looked at me and they're like, "You need a what?" And so, initially, yeah, I think they attempted an individual at first and it just wasn't working. And so I was just like, "I'll do it." And from literally the first night, that we ran that revival, every night we were getting out at 8:10 every night, 8:10, 8:15. Um, and I recognized that there were certain things that had to be in place, that had to happen on time in order for the service to run smoothly. And that's kind of where that whole worship management piece was born. And then ultimately, I ended up coming down to Huntsville. And at the time, the Pastor Snell was pastoring a church where they were having 2 services per day, and the first service was going over longer. So that meant second service was getting out at almost 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And I was telling my parents at the time, who are members of the church, I was just like, "You all need like a stage manager to help you all with this time scenario because this is ridiculous." And mind you, we weren't living in Huntsville at the time. We were just visiting. And she was like, "Well, you need to," my mother was like, "You need to tell, Snell that sounds like something." And so I went to his office, um, and presented the idea. And he made the comment. He was just like, "Sis, this sounds like something only you would be able to implement." And I was like, "Well, that's too bad because we will never move here. Like, we're never moving here. So find somebody that can do this for you." And then, by the grace of God and a little bit of his, sense of humor, we moved down in, 2012, and by October of 2012, I started worship management for, the First Seventh-day Adventist Church where Pastor Snell was ministering at the time.
Well, Danita, let me ask this because not everybody can have be a worship manager at their church, or maybe they can. But
They
what
can.
was yeah, well, yeah, they can.
They
But I think
can, yeah.
what I want to kind of identify is, man, you saw there was a need,
Mhm.
and the need was something nobody said, but I just see there's something that needs to happen,
Mhm.
and when you addressed it, it was like something that was birthed inside of you. Could we say then that for the second chair leader that may not have these skills to be a worship manager, but identifying problems, knowing that there's something inside of them that has the ability to fix?
For sure. I think that's where it kind of came from. I mean, I grew up in church all of my life. My parents were musicians, and so I had the opportunity to go to several different types of churches my entire life. My mother played the piano, my father directed choirs, and so just seeing the different types of worship service, it's kind of like conditioned to feel my way through a service. But I also, as a theater director, I have been in situations where you practice for a play for weeks only to come out to an audience of like 3 and 6 and 9, and what that ultimately does to the morale of the cast. And as much as they, excuse me, don't like to think it, I think that the type of preparation that ministers put into their sermons or speakers put into their speeches or whatever, that there is that deflated feeling when they're getting up at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Especially if, it didn't have to be that way. If because they're getting up at 1 o'clock because so many other things happened before. And so as I sat through different church services and watched that, I felt like I was like, "There's gotta be a better way." But I also am a believer that oftentimes the Lord will introduce a concept to you, in a moment in your life, and you have no idea why that concept got introduced until much later. So the concept of worship management was, ultimately introduced when I was a senior in college, but I
Mm.
did not use it until almost, 2009 when I was able to actually implement it, and then over the years I've been able to perfect it. So, like, the version of worship management that I do now, I didn't even think about was a thing in 2002, but I recognized that something had to happen so that the burden of a successful worship service, did not rest on the shoulders of the pastor of the church or the associate pastor or whomever is speaking that day, that somebody else needed to bear that burden, so that they could concentrate on what it is that they wanted to do.
And that is that clip right there. I'm going to clip it and share it with others because no, that's actually what the idea of serving second is. There is a mission,
Yeah.
and that's in this case, to get the gospel out. And
Mhm.
one person can't do it by themselves. And you saw,
Mm-mm.
hey, there's a need that's somebody's burden on Pastor Snell. Let me see how I can use my gifts, my talents. And let me say this. When you see Danita, she does it with a smile, but it's a very direct, very direct. I need you to move and move now, but you do it in a way where it doesn't distract from the mission. And I really
Yeah.
just want to, first of all, affirm you because people know
Oh,
we did
thank
have a chance
you.
to work together for a year, but then really be able
Yeah.
to see how the impact of that. And then I'm going to shift gears to the next area of your life is the children's creative director for Breath
Yeah.
of Life Ministries. And Breath of Life is a worldwide television ministry, and
Yeah.
you've now been able to work with them. Tell us a little bit about that element of your giftedness.
When Pastor Snell was hired as speaker director and he began to create his team, a lot of people don't realize that I'm a writer. I'm a professional writer, and so I was brought in to just do some light script writing for different promos and things that were going out, and of course for the worship management piece. When Breath of Life travels for a lot of our big revival trips, that is the capacity that I work in. And but oddly enough, there are times when you are called to do something, and there are times when God sends someone to tell you to do something. My little secret is that I have a Master of Fine Arts in screenwriting and storytelling. And one of those classes that I was having to take to do that is writing for animation. And it was a class that I kind of, you know, I dismissed it. Like I did very well in it, but I remember thinking, I am not gonna, there's no reason for me to ever have to use this. I don't ever plan on writing for anybody's cartoon. Like my thing is I love live theater. I love the stage. Give me adult human beings and I'll be able to do that. And right around the time that Breath of Life was turning 50, the manager of Breath of Life, Amalia Dugal, made a comment. She was like, we don't have like a children's ministry at Breath of Life. We're missing a demographic. And so Pastor Snell agreed. And then he literally came in my office one day and he said, I need children's programming for Breath of Life. And that was my only directive. Like there was no other instructions.
Just go.
Just go. And the funny thing about that is that if you know Danita, I people was like, "Oh my gosh, you should do a children's play." I was like, "Listen, I love children when they are with their parents, and I love my children and that's about as far as we're gonna go. And so I was sitting and I was thinking, like, how can I speak to these, to these young people? Because we were trying to get like between like pre-K and between pre-K and like 8 years old, 9 years old. And so I had a focus group with a bunch of pre-K and to 8 year olds who are brutal. I mean, I'm not gonna lie to you, like kids are honest, and I asked them like, what do you want when you turn on? Initially we're going to do an audio devotion. I was like, what do you want when your parents turn on the radio in the car? They turn on a podcast. What do you want to hear? And they told me. And from there, I developed the audio devotional called Evie's Treehouse. The funny thing about that is that I took the final episode. We brought kids in to do the voices, and we added sound effects and the whole 9 yards. I took the first episode in to for Pastor Snell to hear, and he nodded through the whole thing, and he looked at me at the very end of the episode, and he said, "I want it animated." And I will not lie to you, Dr. Toussaint, my heart sunk because I was like, this whole time I was just like, I am never ever gonna use this. Why do I even need this class? Like I was
Yes.
that student. And I'm like, this is why I needed that class. And so Evie's Treehouse, the animated series for Breath of Life, was created, and it really truly has been a joy. We've been able to engage kids. We have parents now that are like panic emailing us because they want to know when the next set of episodes are coming out later this year. Parents,
Yes.
but it's been one of those things where I enjoy research. That's really
Mm.
weird. But if you give me something that I have to research and invest in order to find out the best way to implement it, then you have given me like one of the greatest tasks. And that's essentially what it was. It was less about, this is going to sound weird. It was less about the kids, and more about like doing the research into what they wanted and what they needed. Because oftentimes when people are doing children's programming, they're thinking, oh, we're going to do what the kids want. And nobody's asked the kids. And so through a pizza party and us coloring, literally with about 8 or 9 of them, I was like, what do you want? And they gave me the most incredible dialogue and incredible ideas. And then I went up a few ages to like middle school, and I brought them in for a writing session. And I was like, you guys are going to help me brainstorm because you're closer to your brothers and sisters than I am. I'm an adult. So,
Danita, this you're giving a master class in this, and I want to break it down for some of us GED
yeah.
folks that don't have the skill in the math. But what I love is you identified that initially there was initial concern, and there was a challenge. Or in this case, with when it comes to EV Treehouse, there was something that was missing,
Yeah.
and you've utilized the gifts that God has given you to really kind of hone in. And what I like about it is you didn't just say, I have the answer, but I'm consistently hearing you say, I realize the people that I need to serve
Mhm.
need to hear their voice as well. And
Yes.
I want to say to that person who serves second in the area that you're serving, don't assume that you have all the answers.
Oh, 'cause you don't.
Because you don't, because you
You
don't.
don't.
And I think what I'm hearing you say is that's really been allowed you to be able to serve even better
For
because it's not
sure.
just you have a talent, you have a skill, but other people have information.
Well,
And by gleaning yeah,
yeah,
but jump
you're
in.
right, 'cause I go into everything that I do with the understanding that I am not the expert in this. And I tell all
Wait a
people
second,
all the
stop,
time.
stop, stop, stop. You you have over 20 years doing this,
Yeah,
you have a master's degree, and you're
yeah.
saying, "Okay, I'm not the expert."
I'm not the expert. I'm not the
I love
expert.
it, I
There
love it.
there is somebody out there. So my mother, Antoinette Wilson, used to tell my sister and I something all the time, and I literally this is how I go about my life. She would say, "There's always someone better than you, and
Mm,
there's always somebody worse than you. But when you step up to do what you're supposed to do, it's your time to do it." And so I walk into every task that I'm given, whether I'm assigned or whether I'm called to it, with the understanding that Tucson, there is a better worship manager than Danita Jones. And there's a worse worship manager than Danita. There's a better content creator for children than Danita, and there's a worse. But at this time, at this appointed time, it is my turn to do it. And so I have the responsibility to do that well. And knowing that I don't have all the answers, being able to sit and say, I have no idea how to do this, or I have no idea what I'm going to do about this, but let me go find the answer. Because I think where a lot of people make the mistakes is that they say, I don't know, and then that's where it stops. I don't want to not know. If I
mm.
find something that I don't know, oh, let's go look it up. We are going to go look this thing up. We're going to figure it out, and then we're going to implement it until I find a better way to do
Danita, I am just
it.
I love the way you're able to say that because no, seriously, because usually
Yeah.
there's sometimes people that have gifts and they feel like I am the anointed one. But
Oh,
I'm here, I've arrived, I can handle it. But I
yeah,
love
no.
what you're saying, love what you're
Yeah.
saying, and to be able to see how you've been able to help Deblier and the rest of the Breath of Life and Oakwood University team really expand using their mission is really something, as we talked about earlier, that embodies serving second. But I want you to, if you had a younger Danita that's watching right now, that's kind of leaning towards a serving second, what would you tell her? What would you tell him? That individual that has a gift or that's kind of unsure about it. How can you? What words would you give them, or would you have liked to hear when you were younger?
The words that I would give, it would be several things. The first thing I would say is, slow down, because oftentimes when you find yourself with the solution finally, there's this rush to try to get everybody to understand it. And in the initial time when worship management was introduced, to several different congregations, there was an immediate rejection of it because it wasn't understood. And so I spent probably the better part of a year trying to prove that everybody needed it instead of just being okay with the fact that people were gonna be brought on gradually, It's a marathon, right? It's not a sprint. So that would be the first thing. And the second thing I would say is, you know, be okay with I go into protective mode a lot. One of the things that I tell a lot of people with worship management is that I oftentimes my first service is to all of my pastors, the Oakwood University Church, for instance. We have a lot of them. And so my goal is to ensure that I am serving all of them equally. And so when it is their time to step up on that Sabbath, regardless of who it is, they are going to get the exact same treatment as a senior pastor would if it was his day to preach. But oftentimes too, that does put you in the line of fire, because people would put on me they would be like, "Oh, if you want something done, Danita's the one that's in charge," right? It wasn't until later, in fact, if people were ever close, to me, if I'm talking with Pastor Snell, even in a public area, and you will hear me refer to him as boss, that nickname came from the fact that I was trying to establish to people that Danita's not in charge. And
Mm.
so that second bit of information would be like, you are implementing the vision that you have been given. And the only reason why worship management works so well is because it's not Danita's vision. It is Danita implementing the pastoral vision for the church. So I'm the enforcer, right? I'm the muscle. If we were talking about like organized crime,
Yeah, yeah.
um,
Or
I'm
the mob
they
boss.
have
Yeah.
the plan. I go out and I implement the plan, and that would be a big thing. It's just like you don't have to be out here and prove that you're just implementing the plan, and that is what makes it so successful. And then, the last thing would be like, you're one person, my sister Gina says all the time, Superwoman was a fictional character. And so, in the very beginning, I was trying to do every Sabbath, all Sabbath, every single thing. And I was trying, and I've come to the point in my life where I'm just like, I am one person, and it's important to be a team player. Oftentimes, like even Scotty had to pass to someone, you know, and so to be able to say, if you put the right things in place, and you put it in such a way that people can follow and everybody's on the same page, you can still have an incredible game. And so the same thing is with everything else. Like you don't have to do everything, but you build the right people around you that can help you implement this vision that you were given, and it'll turn out great. So that would be the one of many things I probably would share.
Listen, this week is, and thank you so much for that. This week is Easter weekend, and I know
Yeah.
you have a number of major events that are happening. Where can people find you? Where can they kind of get a glimpse of Danita in action? Where can they identify what's going on?
So Danita in action, definitely April 5th at 10 a.m. at the Oakwood University Church. We are doing our Resurrection Sunday service. It is something that we started last year. That went over so well. Pastor Snell has this vision where he's like, around the time where everyone is talking about Jesus, we should also be talking about Jesus as well. So we are doing this incredible presentation where we are combining drama and preaching together, and music. We have Sandy Patty that is also going to be joining us that day, but you will be able to see just theater and Pastor Snell preaching, where we talk about the road to Calvary, what that
Mm.
looked like, and of course Jesus being resurrected. So it is we're excited about it. We actually are in the midst of our Passion Week, which is another set of worship services that I'm running throughout the week. And so that is kind of like, it is a busy time of year for us, but it is an incredible time of year.
So, family, I'm gonna put the link in the show notes if you just want to go to YouTube and type in Oakwood University Church and just seeing what God is doing there. But Danita, I just want to say thank you for what you've done. The number of people I can imagine, folks in the comments pouring in. Listen, oh, that's the one who's organizing and putting
That's
everybody
the
together.
one, right?
Yes, yeah. I was thinking about a title for this. I was like, "My boss." You're the one that that makes sure when you see Danita, man.
I'm the muscle. I'm the
Yeah,
enforcer.
the muscle, the
And this is
enforcer.
funny. I actually, if I can do a shameless plug, if you don't mind,
Yes, ma'am. Go
I'm
ahead.
actually starting a what I call a worship manager mentorship program for
Oh, I love it.
churches that want to like send their trusted person. I'm starting it in May, where an individual that can, kind of essentially, and you don't have to live in Huntsville. Like this is completely online, where a person can
Mm.
come and kind of, we talk through what their church service looks like. The goal of that is that you have to be at least in the agreement with your pastor, because again, that's the only way that it works.
So, Danita, you are working on something for worship managers. Tell us how we can get some folks involved with that.
I am starting the worship manager mentorship. If you want more about that, you can go to DanitaLachelle.com. And I want to say too, Tucson, it's not just for like worship management.
Hmm.
I cover funerals, I cover weddings. There are ways that you can go about all types of programming, children's programming, where it doesn't have to go forever, where I literally walk people through the ability to be able to create a run sheet, to be able to run their church services. The goal is for churches to send their worship managers to me. And it's a
Mm,
6-week program where we meet every Sunday and we talk about what happened either that day or the day before at your church. And we build out a run sheet in such a way so that not only can your worship be fulfilling, but it doesn't feel long. I tell people all the time that the worst kind of church is even if it's short, it feels long. And so we want to make sure that even if your church service is 3 hours, it doesn't feel like they've been sitting there for 3 hours. So DanitaLachelle.com is where people can go to register and sign up for those classes. Those start in May. So I'm very excited about doing that and sharing this because what good is to have a worship manager that has 15, 14 years of experience and not being able to like pass that on to other people that are trying to do that at their churches. So I'm all about sharing. We're not gatekeeping in this. We are sharing with whomever wants to take that. So
great. So you're creating little enforcers around around the
listen,
world.
yes, we're creating little enforcers to that listen, we're gonna get in trouble if I say to the mob bosses. That would be a
Yes.
terrible analogy, but it's true. Like
Yeah,
it's
but
true.
it's true. But it's true. No, but
Yeah, exactly.
family, this is the fun we have on the Serving Second podcast. We're here. We had a great time with Danita Lachelle. She has been a blessing to so many. But this is where you really have real opportunity to connect, to hear what God is doing, and ultimately use your gifts so that you can serve. And that, at the end of the day, is what we do here at the Serving Second podcast. But we're reminded the mission that I serve is bigger than my title. Thank you so much for joining us. If you want to check out Danita, please make sure that you go to DanitaLachelle.com. We'll put that in the show notes. This has been another episode of the Serving Second podcast. Look forward to seeing you on next week. God bless.
Bye, everybody.